Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I'm really pleased tonight about this event, to have such a wonderful panel. So the title of this event is a conversation on immigration in Italy. And when I've been asked to organize this event, I really wanted to provide the audience with an academic background, but also a practical implications of the decree we will talk about, the so-called Salvini decree, a decree for immigration and security. And so we will have someone explaining for us this decree, because it's very complex. And then we will have a range of experts, activists, and people experiencing the implications of this decree. So I would like to start presenting the guest we have today. I feel very lucky to have all these people here with us. So I will start with Mario Savino. Mario Savino is a professor of administrative law at La Tuscia University in Viterbo, and is also the director of the graduate law program. In 2018, he founded and now coordinates the Italian Academy of Law and Migration, Accademia Diritto e Migrazione, an academic network that involves 250 scholars and promotes advanced research activities on immigration law. He graduated cum laude at the University of Rome La Sapienza, and he received a doctorate in Rome in administrative law. He was also a Global Crystal-Eastman Research Fellow in NYU at the law school. And he published extensively, just to mention some. He's the author of a monograph titled Le libertà degli altri, la regolazione amministrativa dei flussi migratori, which is about public order and the freedom of non-citizens. He also published about the EU migration asylum policy and about EU transnational administration, administrative reforms, transparencies, and access to public information. Then we have Caterina Francesca Guidi. She's a research fellow at the European University Institute called EUI here in Florence. And she joined in 2013 the Global Governance Program at the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies. She holds a PhD in economics from the University of Siena, and her research interests mainly focus on the impact of mobility and migration on European welfare and health systems. She also works on research and data analysis on reception systems and the integration of migrants in Europe. She worked for a number of organizations, including the UN, the European Commission, the European Parliament, NGOs, and she was the research coordinator for the project RISOMA, Research Social Platform on Migration and Asylum. And she's been an activist on human rights, working especially with migrants, asylum seekers, and vulnerable people. And she's the coordinator of the EUI Refugee initiative since 2016. Then we have Sonila Tafili. Sonila is a graduate in Political Science International Relations, and she earned a master's degree in Management of International Cooperation Projects from the University of Florence. Her background is in legal studies. Tafili has worked with a number of associations and NGOs providing legal and linguistic support before creating her own association called I Participate, which aims to promote educational and professional opportunities for young people with a migration background. She has organized a number of cultural events and has developed projects to promote the local craft and social theater. Her current work aims to promote activism and active citizenship practices with young people. Silvia Privitera. She holds a PhD in Semitic philology, and she's an archaeologist by training, having earned a degree in Conservazione dei Beni Culturali with a specialization on the Middle East. She has been active with a variety of NGOs since she was a teenager. Over the past 3 years, she has put her multilingual skills to use, working with associations involved in promoting migrant rights and cooperation and integration. Privitera joined Refugees Welcome Tuscany in 2017 and also works as a tutor for unaccompanied minors. She writes fiction and has also published a number of articles on current socio-political situation on immigration in Italy. And then it's my great pleasure to have here with us Usman. Usman lives in Italy since 2017. He's 19 years old, and he will tell us a bit about his experience here in Italy. He's currently training as a chef. Okay, so before we start with the explanation of this decree and all the big changes, I would like to ask you a bit more about your connections with immigration. I just read your bio, but I know you do incredibly important things. So I really would like to briefly, if each of you can tell us a bit more about your connections with immigration. Should we start by you, Mario?
Sure. Thank you very much, Angelica. Well, I'm an academic, so I've been working on the topic for 10 to 15 years now. Basically, I'm not an activist, but just, again, an academic. And my main objective in this period is to make this Academy of Law and Migration work. This was an idea that I had a couple of years ago. We had a project that could be funded by the Italian Ministry of University. So my idea was, since we have some organizations linking activists, but also lawyers, and yet we don't have a network connecting academics working on this issue, maybe we can find a way to establish it and to, in a way, overcome the gap that the sense of loneliness that most academics in the Italian framework feel, because most of us working on this issue, which is not well established in the academic Italian tradition, we don't have any specific sector dealing with immigration in the legal area. Most of us feel this loneliness because they work together with other scholars that do not have specific expertise in this field. This academia wants to bridge the gap, the many gaps that we have, and geographical also gaps that we have in the Italian environment. This initiative was already very successful. We started in the second half of 2018. We had a kickoff conference in Viterbo, my university, last November, and we already have 250 scholars joining this initiative. It's, again, an Italian initiative, but very open to the contribution of foreign scholars who can join. The membership is open to academics, so professors, researchers, research fellows, PhD scholars, students, etc. Of course, regardless of their nationality. We are mainly Italian, as I said before, but the idea is to, once we have established the Italian branch, we want to open to at least European partners. What we do, we have established two different groups. At the moment, we have 8 groups, 4 dealing mainly with research. They organize workshops, seminars to discuss issues like the Salvini decree. And then we have operational groups. You can find the list behind me. Research groups mainly deal with the external dimension, European dimension, national dimension, integration dimension. Actually, this was just a way to distinguish some of the competencies that are in the group and make the overall group working in a way, because 250 people cannot work together in just one group. So this was a way to find the right dimension for this, for making these people work together. But actually, all these dimensions are actually merged very often in the working activities of these groups. Operational groups are different in kind because they deal with different aspects. One group is devoted to feeding public debate, and this is quite difficult in this moment because, you know, we have a very polarized debate, and the idea of the academia is to avoid, you know, ideology, since we are scientists. Even if it is a soft science, we try to use our knowledge in a way that can help also reducing the polarization in the current debate. Then we have a group dealing with doctoral and postdoctoral students. We organize doctoral colloquia. And then we have other activities like legal clinics, teaching activities, and a laboratory on European Union legislation. I think it is enough. For those of you who want to join, you can just go to the website and you will find the way. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here, and thanks, Angelica, for having organized such a panel. It's not my first time here at New York University Institute, but it's always a pleasure. So, as Angelica was saying, I'm Caterina. I'm research fellow here on the other side of the hill at the Global Governance Program of the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies of EUI, European University Institute. And honestly, I was before an activist than an academic. And I don't want to steal your time to describe how I became interested in such a topic as migration, but briefly, I was born in one of the most interesting cities for such a topic, which is Prato, that I got from Angelica. Some of you have visited through her courses. And I was born in Chinatown, as it's called, the part of the city where still my family lives. And that is not so unusual for some part of the world, some other nationality, but it was in the 80s in Italy. And this experience, I think, meant a lot to me and influenced all my life of human being first, and then my academic and working career. Here, I was invited to take part to this panel to describe what is ongoing on the other side of the hill, which is called the EUI Refugee Initiative. Basically, starting from April 2016, we carry out this program, reception program at EUI. So 6 asylum seekers are living with us in our campus. Probably some of you are familiar with the hill of Fiesole, so you know where we are. Basically, they live with us in Badia Fiesolana, and we bring together this reception program. We are acting as a temporary reception system, as a CAS, together with the Caritas Diocesana of Florence, which is an NGO, a Catholic NGO, I think one of the biggest of Italy, and with Diocese of Fiesole, so the Church of Fiesole. So basically, why? First, why the EUI decided to do that? So it was, as I'm sure some of you remember, it was the autumn of 2015, while we started to see thanks to our direct experience of researcher, but thanks also to the media coverage, what was happening through the Mediterranean route and the so-called humanitarian crisis. So EUI basically decided to do something more and to contribute to take part, to do its part in this so-called, and we will see after why, so-called emergency of the Italian reception system that at the time wasn't able to give an appropriate answer to the needs of people coming to Italy through the Mediterranean route. So it was established, this initiative. It's a bottom-up initiative. It was a group of researchers, and not only researchers, but also administrative staff that asked to the institution, to the EUI, to do something more. And I have to say, with some surprise, I answer yes, and decided to provide us these 2 apartments together with the other partners involved, and together with the Caritas that still keeps the legal protection of our guests, to become also a CAS, and so a first reception center. So basically, people, asylum seekers, they live together with us, and until they are awarded of some forms of international protection. They are in the process of asking for asylum, and according to the Italian law, and we will see the change, but they are waiting to get some form of international protection. So our beneficiaries living with us, of course, they are asked to do some activities. We try to help them with providing them language courses, but not only, also Italian history classes, European history classes, ICT classes, and also to follow them together with a legal expert in their process, in their path, to get a legal status, and also to integrate in the everyday life, and to help them to understand better for what are our possibilities, how the Italian system and European system works. So far, we have to say the initiative work pretty well, and now we are facing problem, as I will be explaining later, that they are, of course, mainly driven and given by the Salvini decree, but Salvini decree was the response of what is happening in Europe, especially in Italy. So, I mean, the situation has been changing rapidly during the last time, so we're facing some other problems, but until now, we have to say that also the guests that left our program for good, because they receive some forms of international protection, they're still part of our network. So basically, what I think we try to give with this initiative, and what I think is the added value of this program, is to be a community, to be a family for these guests, because sometimes we notice, according to our experience expert and as activists, that what is mismatched in the everyday life of asylum seekers or migrants, generally speaking, is to get to know the Italian reality and to know people. And I think it works so well also because we are an international community. We are composed by 54, if I'm correct, because I see some other colleagues here, so 54 different nationalities. So I think probably being foreigner among foreigners works better in a certain way, and because we are more motivated, no, to create such an environment. And I will stop here for the first round.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank Angelica for the invitation. As she said, I'm here today in representation of I Participate, which is an association that I built with a group of other people in 2015. We started out as a group of 40 people who were participating at a training, and after that we decided to build the association. Why is it important for me to tell this story? The reason why is because I think it's a story on activism and on active citizenship, and also a personal story on immigration. So as I told you before, we started out from this project, and what this project did was, the project was on active citizenship, so the goal was to promote active citizenship among second generations. So our organization works with second generations, which the definition in Italy will be young people, or people anyway, who are born or grew up in Italy and who have a migratory background, so who have a parent who is not Italian. The composition of the association is mainly by second generation young people, mostly students and other university students who have different immigration story, just like me, who I actually moved to Italy 13 years ago to study. As I was telling you about the project and how we came to build an association, because many of us were coming from activism backgrounds, so we were already volunteering in other associations. But there is a difference when you are volunteering somewhere where there is somebody else taking care of the organization, and then you build your own association and you have legal responsibility for every paper you sign. So it was at first, it was taking consciousness, okay, of our own status, because we realized that even though you live with some restrictions, you don't really know about them, or you don't really have consciousness, because maybe you have not seen the other side, or what is supposed to be your rights, okay? So, and I will talk about this later when we tackle the citizenship issue. The first step was consciousness, what is wrong, and what are the restrictions for young people who are studying, who want to go for a stage, who want to go for an internship, okay? So that is when you start to understand that, okay, my status is not exactly the same as other people. So we started doing initiatives on the local level. So our first initiative was actually like a flash mob on stereotypes. And then we got in touch with other organizations on the national level, and this was pretty much the time when the immigration issue for young people who are born in Italy was starting to become popular again, because maybe all of you doesn't know, but if you are born in Italy and you have immigrant parents, you are not an Italian, you don't become an Italian citizen right away. So we started to get in the network, and we started moving. We are now part of this network. We do like meetings twice a year when we talk about issues, access to the labor market, what are our education problems, what are the problems for children at schools, and it all became very fast. It all grew very fast because some initiatives took place on the national levels, which were campaigns, okay, organized campaigns, which we took part on, and one is called Italiani senza cittadinanza. We were part of them for some time, which means Italians without citizenship, literally. So we were like going on and back and forth to Rome, you know, to meet with a group and organizing flash mobs on the local level, trying to participate in the public discussion to raise awareness on people, because at the moment there was a project of a modification of the actual legislation on citizenship, and I will explain to you later about this. Okay, so this is pretty much the story about activism and how it all started. We lost some people on the way, obviously, you know, it's not possible. You are 40 in the beginning, and then part of the group was in Pisa. It was, we have now members who live in different cities, not only Florence, but most of them were very young, like some aged 18, so it's not easy to keep the group together. After that, the personal path was grow the competence to make it grow. For each of our members. So for some of us, it was like a side job. I'm going to do this because I believe in the cause. And for others was, this is my calling. So you go with it. So many of us, we achieved masters and did courses on management of international projects. And that was when we understood that living in this multicultural environment, it was very enriching for us, because every time we meet, every time we share stories about tradition in our countries, or food, or traditional dances, okay, and you come up with a new idea. So after that, and after you go through the immigration process of, for me personally, being in Italy for 13 years, you go in a first period of denying where you come from. You kind of, you don't really tell people where you come from, and then you grow and you go through the path of being, this is me, okay, this is where I come from, and you understand how much you can give to your country of origin. So last year we had like 4 projects that were financed, and 2 of them were of co-development, which are projects that are made from diaspora who contribute to the country, of origins. So we have 2 ongoing projects in Albania at the moment, because I'm Albanian of origin. And one of the projects is on social theater. We work with 3 schools in this local area in Albania. And another project is on the promotion of local crafts in another city also. So this was an experience of, having this immigration experience of so many years, of so much training, of so much activism in the territory. We also have local projects, but also understanding the importance to feeling that connection again, and to feel that kind of belonging again, and to take the knowledge back to the country, okay? So I can go on for a long time, but I will pass the microphone. Thank you very much.
So good evening, everybody. Thank to everybody for being here, and thanks to welcome me here. I'm Silvia, and I will represent here Refugees Welcome. That's an association started in Germany in 2013, that arrived then in Italy 3 years ago. So we are quite young in Italy. But also we have to say that the situation is really changing in this period in Italy, and so now is the moment in which we are really improving a lot our projects in all the countries. What is Refugees Welcome? It's an association that tries to help the immigrants to find a home, we can say, or at least to understand how to integrate in the society. A lot of these people, and then we have Osman that will tell his story to you, a lot of these people arrive here, some of them succeed to have some documents, some of them wait for years before to have any kind of document to stay in Italy, then we'll talk about that. But at the beginning they are in some structure, in the CAS, in the SPRAR, and they don't understand what there is around. Quite often they have no idea of what is really the situation in Italy, or what means try to find a job, try to find any kind of solution of staying. They arrive here, they want to stay here, but somebody say, I want to work. It's not so easy in Italy. You have to do lots of documents, bureaucracy, etc. Mainly we try to find an accommodation to those people in family. That is a project very important for both the people that is looking for an accommodation, but also for the people that decide to host them. Those are families, are normal people, like everybody here in this room. Is not any lawyer or whatever. It's normal people that decide to help people that they don't know at all, people that come from other countries for different reasons, and that those families succeeded to host them, but also to help them in the everyday life. Because if you come from Guinea, Senegal, Pakistan, Albania, or whatever, it's completely different, the situation here. I'm not an academic as you. I studied a lot. I have my PhD, but I'm not an academic. I am a mother. Normally I say I'm a mom. My daughter is in the other room, so if you... and that's something that you have to really to understand. Italy is a country of immigration, but also really a country of emigration. So what we have to feel, and what I really felt, and so that's the reason for which I work now. I'm a volunteer with Refugees Welcome, is the fact that we have to succeed to create a net. People arrive from lots of different countries. They have their background. They have their possibility to give a lot also to our country, but we have to help them to understand how to make that. I'm also, as you were saying, a volunteer tutor for unaccompanied minors. So when guys arrive when they are 14, 15, you know, in Italy, I don't know exactly in the States, but in Italy, you don't have the right to represent yourself. So I am the legal representative of those persons. But what is really important, both with Refugees Welcome and both as a volunteer in this field, is to help those people to feel the situation, to understand how to buy the stuff at the supermarket or how to get a document. The situation is changing a lot, is really complicated for the Italian people to understand that. So imagine a person that arrives from another country, but really far away countries with a long trip. They arrive here and they don't understand the language. They just are taken and put in the CAS, in the SPRAR, without understanding anything. So my association tries to develop this situation. We have a lot of people coming that finish the period, the month that for the Italian law they can spend in those structures, and then they maybe have documents, otherwise they are waiting for the documents, the asylum seekers, so they have not yet, and they don't know what they will have, but they cannot do anything. For the Italian law is something complicated. We'll talk later about that. Now I would like you to listen something also by Usman, then we'll talk better about the situation. What I want to give to this panel is the fact that everybody can help the other people, just trying to be in their situation, to feel the situation and to give their own skills. I speak a lot of languages. I try to translate for them, for example. I'm a tourist guide. I take those African, Pakistani, Indians, those people, and I try to explain, you want to live in Italy, you want to live in Florence, this is Florence, not just the CAS in which you stay, in which you spend all the day. Otherwise, you will never succeed to integrate then. Okay.
Thank you very much. I was thinking, before we listen to Usman's testimony, because it's very important, I really would like for the audience to have a context, because you heard words like CAS, SPRAR, that to some people don't mean anything. So I really, before we listen to Usman, whose testimony is very important tonight, I would like to go into really the core of tonight. So what is this decree and what kind of impacts had on a number of social actors, including people like Usman, for example, coming to Italy for a number of reasons. So what happened? How was the situation before? And what's happening now? So before we listen to Usman, Mario, if you could please illustrate to us this decree, which is also very complex. So yes, we really appreciate your explanation here.
Yes, let's clarify one thing. The Salvini decree is changing a lot, but it's part of a major trend that is common to other countries in Europe. All over you, just start from this assumption. We have sovereign states in Europe which are dealing with a political situation, which in most of the cases is a situation in which governments are either composed of coalitions where anti-immigration movements are involved, like in Italy, the League Party, or governments that are under the pressure of an opposition where anti-immigration parties are gaining popular consent. So either way, we are in a situation in which immigration is not a popular topic, and it's a context in which sovereign state, one way or another, have to show their ability to control their borders, their ability to select at the border, their ability to restrict, in a context of crisis or perceived crisis, the entry into their countries. In this context, asylum is a specific target, because asylum is a sort of vulnus, is a limitation to state sovereignty, in the sense that it comes from international law, in most of the cases, international law, European law, etc., protect the right of asylum seekers to enter the country, to apply for protection, and sovereign states cannot do anything legal about it. They have to accept, they have to acknowledge this right. So what is the reaction in a context of perceived migration crisis, etc.? The reaction is to restrict in different ways the ability to exercise this right. This is one way to read a sequence of legal measures adopted in Italy, but again, not only in Italy during the last years. Even with the previous government, which was a center-left government, there was a major legislative measure, the so-called Minniti decree, that was significantly restricting and reducing the level of guarantees for asylum seekers. Now, we have this Salvini decree, which introduced several legislative changes. I will only focus on three of them, the first three in this page. The abolition of human protection is the most relevant. Then we have an extension of detention powers. Then we have the introduction of a mechanism of revocation of Italian citizenship, and I will deal with these three main changes. And then there are other aspects, for instance, the acceleration of international protection procedures with a consequent reduction of procedural guarantees for asylum seekers, the exclusion of asylum seekers from the local reception system, the SPRASH system, which is one side of the coin, and Caterina will talk about it. Let me start with the abolition of humanitarian protection. What is it? It's a residual form of protection for those who are not entitled to the recognition of refugee status, which is the one granted by the Geneva Convention, international law, and are not even entitled to subsidiary protection, which is established by European Union law. Now, this residual form of protection was quite relevant in quantitative terms. If you consider the statistics, for instance, last year we had like 5 to 7% of refugee status recognition, 7% of subsidiary protection, and 20 to 25% of humanitarian protection. So it was the main source of legal permission to stay for asylum seekers, for people fleeing from situations that were quite complicated behind. This protection was granted if there were serious reasons of humanitarian nature. As you can see, this is quite a broad formula. It's a very open concept, and the idea behind the reform is that it was too broad and therefore too discretionary. The administration in first instance and then courts in second instance often had the possibility to expand this notion in order to accommodate it with the humanitarian needs of migrants. This, for the current government, is unacceptable. The idea is that you can only enter the country if you have a right, and you only have a right if you, your situation fits in one of the special cases that replace the humanitarian protection. So the legislation replaced the general formula with 6 specific cases, which are listed here in the slide. First, there is the possibility to obtain a permit if you come from a country of origin where exceptional disasters happened. You can get a permit for 6 months. Then if that exceptional situation is still there, you can renew it. Second, if you are a victim of labor exploitation, again 6 months. One thing is important, notice the length of this permit. Originally, the humanitarian protection lasted 2 years and it was renewable and convertible in work permit. These special cases changed the situation significantly because usually the permit is a shorter duration. In some cases is not convertible in a work permit, so they prevent the migrant from starting a process of economic integration in a way. Special medical needs, 1 year, special protection of non-refugees, in some cases in which they don't get other kind of protection, and yet there is a risk of persecution and torture if they go back. 1 year, victims of domestic violence and acts of particular civil value. Altogether, these cases do not have the same extension of the original clause. So the major problem that the administrative system and migrants as well are facing now is that when their original humanitarian protection permit expires, they may not get another permit for one of these cases if they don't qualify. And this is important. I mean, if you consider the stock of people that are in the situation that had humanitarian protection and the number of people that will very likely not get another permit, then you understand that the result of this change, this legislative change, will mean that approximately 100,000 people in the next 2 years, it depends on the way you count it, but and the way the new instruments will be applied by the administration, these special cases, but overall this will mean that there will be a significant rise in the number of irregular immigrants. And you may wonder whether this is coherent with a decree that has been approved in the name of security. Wider powers of detention of migrants. Now that this is more technical perhaps, but I will try to make it easier. Administrative detention is authorized not just in hotspots, but also in police detention spaces. Actually, this is a major problem of the Italian legislation. Detention in the hotspots is not acknowledged as such in the Italian legislation, and the European Court of Human Rights stressed this point in a couple of cases. Administrative detention is provided for migrants in basically 2 cases, for the purpose of identification and for the purpose of repatriation, return to the country of origin. In the first case, those who refuse to undergo fingerprinting can be detained up to 30 days, whereas another change was the decision to allow detention of migrants for up to 6 months, 180 days, 6 months, for the purpose of repatriation. Before the reform, the deadline was 90 days. And again, the same applies to asylum seekers, which is much more dubious in terms of constitutionality, because here the provision says that asylum seekers who have not been identified can be detained up to 6 months. But the major problem is what for? They cannot be repatriated, so what is the justification for this case of detention? Then we come to the third point, revocation of Italian citizenship. This is a new provision. It's not unique in the international scenario. We have similar provisions in other countries, from Canada to United Kingdom. Revocation is provided, according to the Salvini decree, for naturalized foreigners, not for original Italian citizens. And this is something that, you know, is the object of a significant legal debate. Is it fair to distinguish these two categories? Italians by descent versus naturalized citizens. Revocation is provided for this category for crimes committed for terrorism or subversion of the constitutional order, so serious crimes. And the adoption of this administrative measure can be adopted within 3 years from the final conviction. Now, if you compare this provision with the British provision, for instance, you can realize that there are more guarantees here. According to the British provision, citizenship may be revoked if it is conducive to the public good, which is much more discretionary. Here we have some guarantees. We have a judge that is certain that there were facts of terrorism and that the person concerned was found guilty. There is a final conviction. So let's say the legal confection of this provision is quite sound. Still, there are some problems. The first one is the one I mentioned. There is a distinction between two categories of citizens, and one may wonder whether this is compatible with the principle of reasonableness and equality that is established in the Constitution. And there is a problem of statelessness in the sense that the provision applies regardless of the possibility that the concerned person becomes stateless. We'll see what happens. There are already some question of constitutionalities pending before the Italian Constitutional Court. I don't think that the Italian Constitutional Court will interfere that much because of the political situation and because of the fact that if the Italian Constitutional Court intervenes strongly in this case, a major problem of credibility might arise for the court itself.
So, as I said, there were a couple of terms that are really important in this story, and I would like to ask Caterina to briefly tell us about it before we will listen to Usman and then Sonila.
So yes, basically in these slides I try to describe how the Italian reception system works or work until today. So the reception system essentially comprises these three phases. The first is the phase of first aid and assistance, and the place is usually the hotspot, where the operation of disembarkation and so rescue and identification of people they take place. So usually in the Italian system, main of these hotspots are based in the south of Italy, and then after the identification of asylum seekers, there is this first reception phase that are called CAS, as I was explaining before, temporary reception center, that are meant to be implemented in the existing collective center or in new center established by specific ministerial decrees, and or in case of unavailability of places in temporary structure. And then the so-called second reception phase or system, the so-called SPRAR, protection system for asylum seekers and refugees. There are not so sharp distinction because as we can see from these slides, these CAS, this temporary reception system, they didn't exist until 2011. They were set up as emergency center during the North African emergency. And they are now part of the Italian reception system. Basically, they represent the 84% of the entire reception system among CAS and SPRAR. The mandates for CAS, as I was saying, we have at EUI, are awarded by the respective prefectures, so the Ministry of Interior, and theoretically, asylum seekers should only stay in a CAS for a short time until accommodation can be found in a SPRAR. However, as the SPRAR does not have sufficient place because they are not financed, so it's also due to the political willing to not finance the SPRAR system, most of people stay in a CAS for longer or for the whole duration of their asylum procedure, while they are in their path to get a recognition. Then until 2011, until the Salvini decree, they were meant to go to the SPRAR. So SPRAR is the protection system for asylum seekers and refugees, was created in 2012. And there is a network of local authorities that set up and run reception programs for people forced to migrate. The aim of the SPRAR is to develop the personalized program to help asylum seekers and refugees to acquire again self-autonomy and to take part and integrate into the Italian society in terms of finding employment and housing, access to local service, social life and education. One of the other novelty of the decree is that is going to be changed from SPRAR acronym to SIPRO-IMI, so System for the Protection of International Protection Holder and not accompanied minors. So what are the main changes that we can see in the first analysis of the decree from more a practical perspective, because Mario already gave the legal perspective. So what is changing in terms of CAS, so in the first reception center, is basically, first of all, the money that they are allocated for each person in this reception center. So from 35 euro per day, it has been decided that it depends from the dimension of the CAS of the center, but it will be among 19-26 maximum euro per day. The most terrifying novelty is that no legal assistance, no language courses, not job training programs, and other activities are contemplated in the call for tenders. So basically, the institutions that they are going to apply to manage one of these first reception centers are not obliged by the call to provide such of these activities. And it's terrifying, taking the perspective not only of the asylum seekers in the reception program that of course are the first paying the consequences of this decree, but also by us as Italian society, because of course they do not provide any of these activities, and these because are meant to be very super temporary center. With asylum seekers, they have to spend very few time. One of the most debated novelties also the no binding registration of residence for asylum seekers. So basically, not having such a registration, asylum seekers, and there is an ongoing debate, and we can explain later better among mayors, Italian mayors, and administration and government, if how to overcome such a problem or to respect entirely the law, and also among lawyers there is debate for this provision. So basically the registration of residence, as you can easily imagine, let people to access a huge variety of programs. Just to give you an example, health assistance that is granted by constitution to in Italy to be given to everybody. So I'm not referring to the first aid or the emergency care, but for instance, program like vaccination program without the registration of residents, that will be more tricky to get them and also to register them. So asylum seekers who were eligible, as Mario was saying, for an humanitarian protection, but have not been granted the status yet, will likely face a rejection and become irregular. And this also give also a serious, I would say, deportation threat in the long perspective. While people, deportation threat, and just to mention, one of the main novelty, not of Salvini decree, but Minniti Orlando decree in 2017, was also the establishment of one CPR, Center for Repatriation, per region. Tuscany does not have at the moment, and we have just 5, if I'm correct, in the whole country. And these, they will work exactly for that, to repatriate people forcibly at home. While for people holding this status, the humanitarian status, now abolished, do not qualify for the SPRAR anymore, and risk being kicked out from the reception center. Is very well known that some ministerial office, prefectures, have been already intimated the humanitarian protection holders to leave their centers. Is particular worrying, this perspective, having in mind first, as Mario was saying, the statistics, right? Here I report exactly was Mario mentioned before. So the official statistic of 2016 and 17, the one of 2011, are still under process. So as you can see, the humanitarian protection regards among 25% of asylum seekers at the first appeal. Then this percentage increase at the second appeal, so after the first denial. And is worrying also to think about the possibility of having such people, such vulnerable people, in the street, also because, again, the previous security decree, Minniti Orlando decree, provides this administrative sanction of daspo urbano to basically to keep far away vulnerable people on the street. And this is particularly worrying to think about this possibility applying to asylum seekers or people with humanitarian status. This is particular, more dangerous, I would say, in this province, in the province of Florence, and I take just 2 minutes to explain that, because recent prefectural provision, they decided to restrict, for instance, the asylum seekers' possibility to enter and exit the CAS, the first reception center. So basically now they have to observe a curfew, and they have to stay, they have to be back at 8 in the evening, and until 8 in the morning they cannot leave their home, their reception centers. And if they do not respect this provision, we have seen that they receive as first the cessation of the first reception measure. So they are kicked off by CAS. So potentially thinking about the Tuscany situation, where we have at the moment like 11,000 individuals as asylum seekers, and thinking in perspective of the people that they could be in these two last situation, is particularly worried, and we estimate that something like 5,000 people more, they can be easily put on the streets. And this is, and I limit it here and to this provision, but it wasn't the only one, okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Caterina. Thank you. So thank you, Caterina and Mario, for this extensive background. I think now is a bit clearer. And now, Usman, you are the one, we talked about the theory, but you were the one who went into CAS, into SPRAR. You are the one who is experiencing the changes of this decree. So, yes, we would like to know from you what is your idea, experience about it. So Usman speaks very good Italian and French, and so Sylvia is translating for him.
I hope I will succeed. Ok.
Tu peux commencer?
Oui, tu peux commencer. Et...
Tu vas traduire?
Oui.
Okay.
I translate.
Bonsoir tout le monde.
Buonasera a tutti.
Anglais.
Good evening, everybody.
Je m'appelle Ousmane Kamara.
My name is Ousmane Kamara.
Je viens de la Guinée-Conakry.
I'm from Guinea-Conakry.
J'ai 19 ans.
I'm 19 years old.
Bon, je suis venu en Italie, ça fait 1 an, 7 mois.
I arrived in Italy 1 year and a half ago.
Quand j'étais venu, le premier ville que j'étais, c'était à Calabria.
When I arrived, I was first in Calabria, in the south of Italy.
Après, on m'a transféré ici à Florence.
And then they transferred me here in Florence.
Donc, au moment que j'étais venu, tout allait bien. On n'était pas paniqué.
When I arrived, everything was okay. We didn't have any panic.
Bon, maintenant, le décret de Salvini est venu. Il a gâché tout.
But now the Salvini decree arrived and everything was destroyed. Because of this decree and this situation, some of us lost their possibility to stay in Italy. Some of them also died. For example, I lost some friends of mine because they wanted to escape from Italy because they were illegal because of this decree. And so they tried to go to France, but in France and Italy there are the mountains, so cold temperature killed my friends. If you don't have any documents, it's not so easy to go from Italy to France. You have to go illegally, hiding in the cars or anyway going through the mountains, and so it's very cold in winter mainly. I will not say that Salvini is a bad person, etc., etc. I will just talk about the decree that he made. Also because I don't know him. When I was in Calabria and then I left Calabria to come here, I saw a lot of people sleeping in the street. because they were closing the center, they were putting the people in the streets because they didn't have anymore the right to remain in the CAS or in the SPRAR. And so I saw a lot of people sleeping in the street, but also women with children, because if you don't have the paper, you don't have the right to stay there. When you have the documents for staying for 2 years, it's not then so easy to renew them, as Mar was saying. And also, a lot of time you need a job in order to renew that, but it's not so easy to find a job in Italy. And then I'll talk a lot about that. The problem is also that a lot of people that has the documents, for example, the one of 2 years, they sleep in the streets. They don't have any right of doing something. And a lot of people are in so bad situation that they arrive to do jobs that also in their country they would not do. For example, people working since 7 in the morning till midnight for 30 euros for all the day, and that's not human. Those people has no choice. They have to do that because they need some money. They want to remain in Italy, but also if they don't want to stay in Italy and they want to come back to their country because the situation is so bad here, they cannot often come back to their country because they don't have the passport. And for also to get the job permit, but also if you want to come back in your country, you need to have your passport. They cannot, so they work illegally sometimes for those amount of money. Some countries have the embassy in Italy, in Florence or in Rome or in Milan. Guinea, for example, not. There is just the consolato. If you want to come back to have your passport, you may get from the embassy a special paper that allowed you to come back to your country to make the documents there. But to do all that, so go to the embassy, for example, in Milan, stay there, take the documents in order to go back to your country, you need a lot of money, and we so need to have money, so we need to have a job, but already we say you cannot get the job. We have a lot of those people that so need to get job, etc. But a lot of people arrived here in Italy just since 1 year. They stayed in the CAS, for example, or in the hotspot, so they don't have any idea of the language, for example. So how they can get a job, how they can integrate in the society. So I know a lot of them that arrived to sell drugs because that's the easiest and sometimes only possibility to get some money, and they sleep in the streets and they don't have any, for example, health assistance, thanks. So there is some association here in Florence, for example, this Buonanotte, that allowed some of those people to sleep and to rest for maximum 3 nights, and then you have to make 1 day at least away. But thanks to that is not really a great help, but at least you can sleep some night there and not in the streets. We didn't have a lot of illness. Because of course, this situation happened in winter time, because remember that the decree started the 5th of October. So then we had all the winter to put all these people in the street. This thing was already started to be introduced by my colleagues here. So about Ousmane, exactly, what happened to him because of this Salvini decree. So he arrived here in 2017, and he made the commission in August last year, 2018. Commissione is the moment in which you finally go to say what are your problems, why do you want to stay in Italy, and so they decide, yes, you can have the asylum, you can be a refugee, or no, or you can have the humanitarian protection, humanitarian documents, or not. He did the commission in August, but what happened was that the Salvini law was in process. And so they told him, yes, okay, we give you the one of 2 years, the humanitarian protection, but wait 1 moment, because we have to see what Salvini will say. So the Salvini law arrived in October, so 2 months later, but he doesn't have his paper yet because the people of the commission didn't decide yet, because they don't know exactly, and that was what he's saying, that somebody say is not legal, this law. So they didn't decide if they have to follow the Salvini decree, and so he will not have the humanitarian one, but he will have special cases or something else, or if they have to follow the previous law, because he did in August the commission, so if they have to follow the previous law. So in this moment, he knows that they gave him the humanitarian one, so the one for 2 years, he can work, he can find a job, he can then renew that, etc., 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 but he doesn't have his document yet. He says some of us, me and other people, were getting crazy because when I arrived in the SPRAR where he's sleeping, so this place where he is, they told him, you can stay here 6 months. So those 6 months in the SPRAR are the moment in which you can follow some lesson, Italian class, so do something to prepare yourself to then go alone. But now, for example, for him, in June, he has to leave the SPRAR. And there is people that tomorrow, next week, they have to leave the SPRAR. But if you don't have any family here, if you don't know the language, if you didn't do any class, because as he was saying before, the CAS officially has to be for a time, but then they leave you there 1 year and a half, so then you cannot follow any class, you cannot learn Italian, you cannot find a job, and then one day in the SPRAR, because then you finish your possible time in the structures, and then you go in the street without any possibility to live, to have food, to have a place to sleep, because you don't know anything and you don't know how to move around. And when I go around and I see, I mean, a lot of the people that were in the SPRAR and now are in the street, I meet them, for example, in the McDonald's, close to the train station, there is this McDonald's that's open till late. But there you can stay, and it's a warm place, you can stay, but just if you take something to eat or to drink, you see the people with the open eyes, but they are sleeping, their mind is sleeping, but they stay like they're like ghosts, because of course it's not a place where you can sleep. So if the people of the McDonald's see you sleeping, they come there, oh no, you have to wake up, that's a place where you have to stay. So you see people there that are getting crazy because you stay 3, 4, 5 nights without sleeping. Just in this situation, you don't know what to do, where to go. And this, you have to imagine that I'm in this situation. I know that in 3 months I have to leave the structure, and I see these people, and of course that I think that in 3 months I will be in the same situation. I don't know anybody here. I don't have any friends that can host me then. I don't know anything. I don't know what I will do. And so, of course, the Salvini decree touch me, change my situation, of course, because I would be lying if I will say that it didn't affect me at all.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Usman. I think this was such an important testimony, because every time we speak about refugees and the decree and what's happening, but it's just us here. After this conference, we go back to our place, and some people, because of this decree, are in the street. So I think having such a first-hand experience was really important. Okay, we have a bit of time for questions now. I really would like to know if some people have questions for our speakers, and maybe if someone is interested in the citizenship, Sonila will tell us a bit more about it. So let's take some questions.
I want to clarify one legal point. A few days ago, the highest Italian court, the Corte di Cassazione, which is different from the Constitutional Court because it establishes the correct interpretation of laws, not the Constitution, but ordinary laws, said one thing that is important to you and to all the asylum seekers. It said that for all the applications that arrived, that were submitted before the 5th of October, before the entry in force of the decree, the old regime applies. The more favorable regime applies. Exactly. So the new legislation is not retroactive, does not affect all the situations related to applications before the entry into force of the legislative decree. So that means that you will get your papers, and all the friends that you have that applied before the 5th of October will get the old protection, humanitarian protection for 2 years.
And what about the renewal? The people that asked for the renewal of that in September.
That is the major problem. As I said, the transition from the old regime to the new regime is the major problem because it will heavily affect all the persons that got the humanitarian protection in the past. When it expires, they will have to apply again, but on the basis of the new rules. And if they do not qualify, if they are not eligible, then they will not get any protection and they will be without papers.
Yes. For example, about that, I have a friend of mine, just because I am the person working or volunteering with those situations. A friend of mine, 2 years expired in September, so he made the renewal, but he doesn't know if they will give him the new one, and lots of months passed already. He has a job, so I say, okay, I can apply for the one for the job. No, because you don't have the passport. So all the situation is like that. We told at the beginning that this decree was called the security decree, but I think you can easily understand that putting all these people in the street, or putting all these people in the situation in which they cannot work, they cannot study the language, they are putting those immigrants in a situation of became illegal. So what the decree is doing mainly is to put the fear in the people, in the population. For example, refugees welcome, but other situation like the volunteer, what he's trying to do is to say, no, one moment, those are persons, are not criminals. You want maybe that they became criminals, but if we give them the possibility to work, to be legal, they want to be legal. So if you open your house, if you open your heart to these people, you can help them. Another friend of mine, he arrived here because he was sick. He has a very bad illness. So he is an asylum seeker now, but he said to me, Silvia, if they will not give me the refugees status, what I have to do? I have to hope to be ill all my life in order to remain in Italy, because remember that the illness document is just for 1 year, and then 1 year, and then 1 year, but it's not convertible in work one. So I said to him, hopefully not, but officially you have to be ill for all your life, but anyway you cannot work legally in Italy. So you understand that at the end what you will have are 100,000 people that probably will sleep on the street, commit crimes because they don't have any other possibilities to live. They will not have the possibility to come back to their countries because they don't have the passport. So it's all a situation in which people, and I want to underline this idea of people, person, that try to find a solution for their problem, a new life, are in a situation in which they cannot do anything here. Sorry for this.
And yes, just to add that I think we have analyzed today, just to also to stimulate some kind of question, different orders of problems. First of all, the only way to get legally into Italy nowadays is to ask for some forms of international protection. And that's a big drama because on one side, I think that it stresses a lot the right of the international right of asylum provision, while on the other doesn't give the possibility to a lot of people coming through very dangerous routes and paths to ask for a permit, job permit, or to ask for instance, as they have in other countries, a temporary permit while looking for a job, right? So first, we have this kind of problem. Second, that is a big contradiction, I think, lying behind our reception system. Second, I think one of the most horrifying consequences of what Usman was already saying perfectly and very clearly, so we don't have anything to add. But what I think is happening in the city, and that's because exactly as Silvia, I'm volunteering all the day to this initiative, so I see the daily consequence of the Florence prefecture decisions, and I take personal responsibility to say that. I'm not representing my institution, just to be clear, and but I'm representing myself. So, and is literally for a project like us, that we are trying to be another kind of CAS. We provide these 2 apartments, and people, they are and still completely autonomous and independent, and nobody, we don't have a worker dedicated to our CAS, because we in the system, we had this possibility in the past to have these appartamenti in autonomia, autonomous apartments, and that it was our choice, because we decided, of course, and together with our guests and beneficiary of this program, we take every kind of decision, because they have a direct impact in their life before then in our institution. So it's very important, and we decided to adopt this form because, of course, we are first of all human beings without any etiquette, and we are born and we are meant to live freely. So to give them the manyest possible tools to carry out independently their lives, and some provision, as the one that I was mentioned before, the one adopted in Florence, they limitate and they restrict their daily freedom in a very embarrassing way, because imagine that you follow, I don't know, language classes, or you do some vocational training, or you are just looking for a job, and you try a new job, and you have to come back home at 8. Imagine for people that have to come back home at 8 in the evening in Fiesole, that you have, it means like 40, if you are lucky, minutes of bus from the city center of Florence to up to the hill. So otherwise, if the police or carabinieri, they come to the CAS and they do not find you physically there, or even worse, also if they find your signature, they do not believe your flatmate that you are sleeping, and so they wake up you literally to identify you personally. But anyway, if they do not find at home, you receive the end determination of this first reception measure that you are entitled to have as asylum seekers. And so just for 1 hour, 2 hours, of course there are ways to overcome this kind of provision, but it's imagine, as Silvia was saying, living a period of your life and like this, and also because most probably, since you have done such a way through the Mediterranean route, or you have, for those people coming from sub-Saharan Africa or coming through Libya or Niger route, you have suffered problems and tortures, violence, and you have suffered a lot of problems, and you have already some mental problems. Imagine as such a stress situation, how increase the probability of being mentally sick, for instance. And so sometimes I ask security of who? I mean, security decree, of course, is not contemplating people that they have an impact on. And just to underline, yeah.
So we have the last 5 minutes left. If someone would like to ask a question, we can take one. Hi, thank you.
Hi, my name is Carolina Ripsick. I'm a student at UC Berkeley. I'm writing an article for Florence News, and I have recently read, and I think it's briefly mentioned here today, that certain mayors, like in Palermo and I think in Gran Toscana, have said that they're going to push back against the self-audit decree. I'm just wondering what that looks like practically speaking for the asylum seeker. Would they be, if these mayors are successful against pushing back on that, are they even able to do that nationally speaking in terms of the law? And what does that look like in terms of them getting the resources that they need?
Well, yeah, I think this is a point where you know, politics and law merge, and it's difficult to distinguish. But let's clarify one thing: the main issue related to this movement of measures is related to the fact that, according to the decree, there is no binding registration, as Caterina was mentioning, no binding registration of residence for asylum seekers. So, since at local level they are responsible for that registration, basically they decided to register, to keep registering them in order to allow all the asylum seekers to get all the social services that are related to the residents. We may call it a rebellion, but we can also call it a correct legal interpretation of the law, because the law doesn't prevent registration, makes it not binding, but de facto what is happening is that at local level registration keeps going. Of course, this is one of the most tricky changes in the law, because it may not change anything, but it may also allow some mayors to make things worse for asylum seekers. So it makes it discretionary in a way, even though if you make a systematic interpretation of the Italian legislation, the result is always the same, that this change didn't change anything, because in terms of legislation, as a systematic interpretation, there is still the need to register asylum seekers at the local level. Of course, this was a good opportunity for some political, local politicians to, take the stage at the national level, say, I am against Salvini, and I will, but they do not have legal powers, they do not have any institutional way to bring things forward. They can only keep registering.
Okay, I think we can end it here. I really would like to thank you so much for all this conversation we had. So I would like, if we could give a big clap. Mario Savino, Caterina Francesca Guidi, Sonila Tafila, Silvia Previtera, Osman Bakara, thank you so much. We will stay in the reception here, so there's some drinks and food, and we are here, so in case you have further questions, thank you very much.